Welcome boys and girls, Costin here with a discussion about the Legendary Lords of the Lizardmen in patch 6.3 for Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. It should be noted that Creative Assembly is going to introduce certain bug fixes and improvements in 6.31 for Lizardmen and Tomb Kings. Mostly with respect to the Lizardmen, I expect blessed units and the acquiring of spawning sequence to be improved on, various bug fixes, but I don't really expect to change those kind of fixes to change the tier rankings over here for the Legendary Lords. So starting with the very worst, making my way to the very best of the Lizardmen. And the very worst is Tic-Tac-To. Tic-Tac-To's playstyle just doesn't work especially well. If we're looking at him as a Legendary Lord, he starts in the Southlands, in the Southern Jungle, and he starts at war with not just Greenskins, but also Warzag as a Legendary Lord. And Warzag can be pretty scary to deal with, and you're not necessarily very well equipped to do so. The one advantage you do have is that the jungle does give you a huge amount of ambush success chance, so that's one of the things you can use against Warzag. But in terms of faction effects, lord effects, focus in this campaign, it just doesn't work particularly well. You do get a right that increases your campaign movement range for all armies and characters when performed. Your skink hero starts with the Pterodon mount. Your campaign line of sight is increased by 25%, and Pterodons gain a unique Bal ability, which is a bit useful, but the problem with Pterodons is that they're not really great units. They're kind of like discount gyrocopters. Gyrocopters can be exceptionally useful. Pterodons leave a lot to be desired. The only Pterodon unit that might be worth getting are these blessed Pterodon riders with Fire Leech Bolas. That's it. The rest of them, not really worth looking at, not really worth using in a campaign, as far as I see it. Even for Tic-Tac-To, who's supposed to focus on that. And on the subject of that right, you get immunity to high seas attrition, you gain additional campaign movement range, but it's a 20 turn cooldown right that only lasts one turn. So it is not really useful whatsoever. Maybe that could be improved, who knows. In terms of the Lord himself, you do start with a weapon that gives him free control in all provinces, Blade of the Skies, 10 leadership for his army, which is a bit redundant because the Lizardmen do have really good leadership. And you can also get an item that increases your campaign movement range by 10%, which certainly is useful. But skill line wise, Lord effect wise, you get minus 50% upkeep for Pterodons. Okay, but again, they're just not that really useful. Melee attack in foreign territory, not really useful for the kind of playstyle he's looking to use. Because you don't want to use your flying units for melee attacks. They're not good on that. And this is kind of one of the big problems for Tic-Tac-To himself. He is really weak in combat. He doesn't have a range attack. His melee stats are really lackluster. His HP is non-existent, pretty much. He's just not going to do well in a combat situation himself. And having a Lord being able to provide combat use himself is a pretty big deal. Tic-Tac-To is the only Lord of the Lizardmen that has very little combat utility on his own. When you look at his special skill line, he has leadership, melee attack when attacking, some benefits in melee for himself or certain units. The only things that I would say that are worth it here are the ammunition for Pterodon riders by 25%. Problem is they do just so little damage, especially against when you're looking at Warzag, that it doesn't feel that great. You do get missile strength, casualty replenishment, Skink Chief hero capacity +2, so you can get 3 of these very quickly, and you do start with 1. And then you get the Drop Spear of Topek upgraded for himself. So okay, not completely useless, but the playstyle in itself just doesn't work. And you also start with the ability of getting Pterodon riders. Suffice to say, in this campaign, it is much better to just forget Pterodon riders, go full in on Saurus and play the campaign that way. Like, you might just get a couple of these just to beat Warzang early on, but outside of that, it's probably just best in a longer campaign to ignore that and focus on Saurus, focus on a generic playstyle for the Lizardmen. I mean, at least he has some faction effects, but they're just not really that good in any way, shape, or form. He's weak in combat, he's weak in the campaign, and it's not a question that he has a hard campaign, though certainly dealing with Warzang is the hardest situation for any Legendary Lord of the Lizardmen to deal with, but overall, the tools he has available are not worth it whatsoever. At number 6, we have Lord Mazdamundi, who in a lot of ways should be the strongest Legendary Lord of the Lizardmen, but he is one of the weakest. I mean, he does have some benefits, unlike Tic-Tac-To, which is completely feels pointless at this stage. But let me be clear, those benefits mostly associate with him with his starring settlement in Oxyotl, with the landmarks that he does have over there, though they do require you to get to tier 5, with the fact he starts with the Saurus Scar Veteran, with his own skill line. His faction effects might as well not exist. He gets a 40% construction cost for Star Chamber buildings, which are a building you really don't care too much about, and they're not really expensive. You lose twin diplomatic relations for all non-Lizardmen factions, so a lot of people hate you. Diplomacy is harder to do in his campaign, so you're just asking for a certain frustration in this campaign in terms of faction effects. The upside is that Mazdamundi has 2 traits. He has Venerated, which gives him casting benefits and a minus 30% upkeep for Temple Guard, as well as second generation, which gives him even more casting benefits. Though, as a caster, I would say he's not one of the best in the game. I mean, Ruination of City, sure, Banishment, having a Dino Mount, all that, but it does leave a lot to be desired. His items are not necessarily that great, though. Getting plus 50% chance to steal an item post-battle, that's pretty solid, but other things, not necessarily so much. So, skill-wise, leaving a lot to be desired. Faction effects, leaving a lot to be desired with Mazdamundi. I would say he has actually become useful in combat in certain ways. Just some changes like getting Soul Quench, getting second generation has made him a bit more useful from a combat perspective, but he's still got a lot of issues to deal with. On the flip side, however, Mazdamundi pre-6.3 embodied all of the major issues the Lizardmen had in terms of research, in terms of buildings, economy, etc. The fact that that situation has been improved means his campaign is better. You can do faster construction, you have access to more units in a campaign faster. It's still a campaign where you might as well be playing a generic lord, but that's kind of the same problem with Tic-Tac-To, because the benefits Tic-Tac-To has are not really great benefits whatsoever. You do start that war with a minor Sinnelleos faction, and the faction leader of that Sinnelleos faction could probably kill your entire army on his own. That's pretty scary. Though Mazdamundi might be better suited to handle that. But it's not a great starting position in certain ways with the factions you're dealing with, the tools you're given, but you overcome the Sinnelleos faction, you overcome Norska, and you'll be able to more or less dominate this campaign area without too much difficulty, at least at the moment. So there are some benefits there in respect to that, like casting ability, like just all these kind of benefits. Once you get them to a certain level, once you unlock certain things, you know, bounce spell, banishment, I would say like all the same. However, I would say that he's still lacking in some really, really good spells. Because yeah, again, Ruination of Cities, but then and a couple of other things, but a lot of these things are just not really great spells. And Mazdamundi should be one of the strongest casters in the game, and he's not the strongest caster. Gelt, faction-wide, is substantially better. For instance, Lord Kroq as a legendary hero is much better. For instance, Drazif is a much better caster, like 10 times the better caster, because he actually has incredibly powerful spells available to him. So just those kind of issues to be looking at with Mazdamundi. Used to be complete pain and misery. It's better, but mostly because of the racial update, not because Mazdamundi himself has suddenly magically gotten better. At number 5, we have Tehenhauin of the Cult of Otik. Now, Tehenhauin himself is a strong legendary lord. He has strong faction effects. He does have a good amount of power. He has kind of a safe starting position, though you will end up in a war with Kroq-Gar and Skrull, though you can beat the crap out of Skrull with pretty huge ease because of the kind of benefits you get in battle. However, this campaign is flat out broken in quite a few ways, and that's the reason I'm not putting it higher. Because it should be higher, but it just does have one major problem that I'll get into. But let's take a look at faction effects. You get sacrificial offerings, you get plus 200% upkeep for Saurus, but that's not a big deal because it's very easy to get to tier 2 in terms of the prophecy of Sotik and resolve that situation. And look, using skinks early on is not really an issue. And you will certainly beat back Lord Skrull with significant ease in this campaign. That's because you get physical resistance for skinks, leadership fighting against Skaven, corruption, local province as lord effects. In terms of special skill line, you get either fanatic or promises of reconstruction. Let me put it like this. There are obviously some benefits in fanatic, but promises reconstruction with 2 control in all provinces, income from buildings plus 30% local province, minus 2 corruption, wins of magic benefits, casualty replenishment, upkeep for skinks, sacrificial offerings generate a global recruitment capacity, local recruitment capacity. They just are far better than fanatic. The entire skill line feels a bit questionable. On the flip side, you do get an ancient stegodon with an engine of the gods as a mount. Sure, it takes you until level 20, but it's still a pretty good mount. Like, Tehenhauin himself would be very weak in combat. Once you put him on an ancient stegodon, that dynamic changes completely. And you do get extra control, increase the amount of spawning sequences earned by rights, which it's not a great situation with a spawning sequence right now. Then we can also look at the sacrifices of Sotik. So the sacrifices of Sotik vastly improve the campaign situation that you're dealing with as Lizardmen. They give you armor, they give you leadership, jungle swarm ability, casualty replenishment, blessed chameleon skinks and spawning sequences over there for certain units. So you get a bunch of units, you get a bunch of spawning sequences, you get random followers, banners, growth. These benefits are gigantic. So why don't I put this campaign higher? Why not even at the top? Certainly some people, including Legend of Total War, believe it's a really good campaign. Well, one major reason, and this is the one thing that's going to piss you off if you're playing this campaign. When you get to tier 2 of the Prophecy of Sotik, you start a global war between all Lizardmen factions and all Skaven factions. Now, that might seem great in theory, but here's the big problem. It breaks the AI. So it's going to break the AI of all Lizardmen factions, it's going to break the AI of all Skaven factions, and it's not really going to work all that well from a campaign perspective. That is the reason, the primary reason, actually the sole reason, why I would not put Tehenhauin higher. If you're willing to deal with that, and keep in mind, the AI already has tons of issues, but if you're willing to deal with that, and know that the moment you get to tier 2 over here, you're going to end up at war with a lot of Skaven. If you're willing to deal with that, it will be a very powerful campaign, to be sure. But keep in mind the major downside that you're also going to be dealing with during the course of this campaign. And as far as I see it, if you have a Legendary Lord that literally breaks the game, and breaks the AI even further than the AI is inherently broken by default, I can't really consider that a great Legendary Lord. I get the power argument, I understand it, it obviously is there, and the kind of benefits he gets are significant, and they go a long way towards improving playing a Lizardmen campaign, but all the same. You know, it would be nice to get something that would allow you to navigate the jungle faster over here, but all the same, you have ridiculous benefits. Like, it can, like, you might think it's just growth control and all that, but these followers are not inconsequential. They are ridiculous. And when you're playing a campaign like this, it's very, very easy to maintain these benefits consistently. To give you an idea of how powerful those Rites of Sotek are, if you look at this chart, right, then understand that CA took this system and added it to Khorne. And everyone who's played the Khorne campaign knows how ridiculous those kind of things are. In fact, the amusing part, Khorne has a weaker version of this system. That's all that needs to be said. And number 4, we have Gor-Rok. Gor-Rok is an extremely powerful legendary lord. In fact, he is a one-man army on his own, or at least an unkillable army on his own. Seriously, you can throw this guy against many legendary lords and their armies, and he will survive. Looking at his faction effects, he gets the Rite of Resilience, he starts with lower Kroq, he gets barrier HP for all units when defending settlements, and he gets extra defensive supplies, which really will only be relevant for provincial capitals, and having a benefit towards defensive sieges is not especially great, because usually the way you want to play a campaign is to avoid having to fight those sieges in the first place. If someone's attacking your settlement, a provincial capital in particular, you're doing something wrong. The problem is Gor-Rok is going to struggle in his campaign quite a bit because he's got some major factions that are all going to be coming for him. But before we talk about that, let's talk about Lord effects. He gets 100 offensive supplies per turn when under siege, all regions, 15% unit mass for his army, missile resistance for his army, and yes, that does include him. He has a silver shield. On top of that, he gets a whole bunch of combat benefits for himself and for Saurus for his army. He's unbreakable, so he will never flee to the death. Melee attack, leadership, speed, melee attack causes terror, battle healing cap 100%, regeneration, mace, this mace that gives you dazed, base weapon damage, armor piercing damage, and melee attack, as well as a shield. So he is very, very durable. And on top of that, he can also give his Saurus barrier HP, but not just himself, also Saurus Old Bloods, if we're looking at the situation, they also get that benefit. So it's kind of a hidden faction effect over here for Gor-Rok. And starting with Lord Kroq means you start with a nuclear weapon in your campaign. All those lovely, juicy items over here and the deliverance of Itza. 1, 2, and 3. Just take your pick. Tactical nuclear weapon, intermediate, and intercontinental ballistic missile. Right here. So yeah, Lord Kroq and Gor-Rok can solo the vast majority of early game armies. And all of that is good, but here's the problem. His campaign suffers from 2 major issues. 1, the terrain of Lestria is not really good. So there are lots of choke points, lots of problems with interaction, pathfinding, movement. That is a genuine frustration to be dealing with. Especially when you're at war with a lot of factions. So you've got Rakarth to the west, you've got Lord Kroq to the south, you've got Skulltaker to the north, and you also have Luther Harkon to the east. All of these factions, to a degree or another, are going to be marching against you. And yes, that is as scary as it does sound. You certainly have one army that's capable of defeating any single one of them, or probably all of them at the same time in combat, but you're lacking resources. Because the problem with Saurus are fairly durable units by themselves, so having an extra durability to them, yeah, that's good, but the issue is it kind of feels a bit redundant. What they really need is more damage, lower upkeep. So Gor-Rok works, he is powerful, and he certainly has a huge amount of power from the beginning with Lord Kroq. But Lord Kroq is not really a long-term benefit. If you want to have a bit of an interesting or powerful early game, sure, can be fun, but later on he kind of just falls off compared to the other Legendary Lords that are higher on this list. That's my simple perspective on Gor-Rok. There's not really much to say. He's powerful, he's defense-oriented, and he's up to his neck, and enemies that are going to try and kill him. So enjoy that situation. It does work, it can work, and be a bit fun when you're not dealing with a horrible pathfinding Illustria, but that's kind of the issue, isn't it? Though it should be pointed out that the Blessing of Quetzal in general gives barrier HP, it just matters really a lot more in Gor-Rok's campaign because of his focus on Sar's Temple Guard, as well as various ways to get barrier, be it faction effects, the right, or Lord effects. Anyway, at number 3, we have Kroq-Gar. Kroq-Gar has a significant economic benefit. He has a minus 15% upkeep benefit for armies led by Sar's Old Bloods, which does stack with the Blessing of Quetzal. Sar's buildings grant additional bonuses to Sar's Scar Veterans and Sar's Old Bloods. He gets 1% of weapon strength per character rank for Sar's Scar Veterans and Sar's Old Bloods, so your heroes and lords. 30% experience for Sar's Scar Veterans and Old Bloods, so your lords and heroes, those ones in particular, are going to rank up better. He doesn't have stronger Sars, but he has cheaper Sars, or just cheaper units in general, when they're led by Old Bloods. Also, himself, he gets minus 15% upkeep, ambush success chance, weapon strength, so those kind of benefits and unit experience for Sars Warriors and Cold One Rider units. Skill line-wise, he gets his pick of choice, or really a whole bunch of combat benefits when dealing with various factions. He doesn't really have a special skill line, but he does have Carnosaur as a mount, so that is pretty damn scary, and of course he does have that blessing. So you're looking at minus 30% upkeep benefit for himself, for Saurus, as well as any army that is being led by Old Bloods. It's not the most complex campaign benefit, but it is one that absolutely works. He also starts with the ability of getting the Golden Tower of the Gods in his campaign. So that is a pretty solid benefit. It's not the safest starting position to have in a campaign, but it can work pretty well. And you can even avoid a war to a degree with Warzag, like just getting a non-aggression pact from turn 1 in this campaign. But then we look at the benefits he can get from the Underground Lagoon that goes all the way into the Temple Guard Barracks. So let's take a look at the situation. You can recruit Scar Veterans at Tier 2. You can increase capacity at Tier 3. So that means you can get more heroes through regular buildings than other Lizardmen, because just having access to Scar Veterans at Tier 2 is a pretty big benefit. And then he increases their recruit rank as well. So pretty solid benefits all around to work with. He does start with the Skink Priest. He does start with some Blessed Saurus warriors. Again, not the most exciting or complex systems, but they are ones that do end up working decently well during the course of a campaign. And that is really the key point as far as I see it with regards to this campaign. You just get more heroes, you get cheaper units, you have more flexibility on the campaign map. Sure, you're still in the jungle with all of the issues that come from the jungle. You do still have to deal with Warzag at one point, or other factions as well. But all the same, these are the kind of benefits that do end up functioning pretty solidly during the course of a campaign. So I think like the potential that Kroq-Gar has is certainly higher than other Legendary Lords, with the exception of Tehenhauin, but obviously Tehenhauin has some other issues in his campaign that I've mentioned. At number 2, we have Nakai the Wanderer, and it has been a long journey for Nakai from being one of the worst, if not the worst, campaign in Warhammer 2 for the Lizardmen to being one of the better ones, because of the kind of benefits that he does unlock. Nakai has a vassal faction that occupies settlements, and they generate money for you. It's not necessarily the largest pool of money that you can generate, though you are able to increase that vassal tribute. You're immune to diplomatic penalties from trespassing, you're not affected by climate and your campaign in any way because you don't really care. You're not the one taking control of the settlements, and your vassal faction just has a structure over here that generates for them 750 income, which is a huge amount of money, and if you're playing any faction around Nakai, you can actually take advantage of his vassal to trade stuff to them for a huge amount of money. Then you have a Lord Recruit rank benefit for Kroq-Gar Ancients. I don't think it's worth it personally. I still think Star Soul Bloods are just better. They're trying to make it work, but suffice to say that kind of upkeep benefit that Star Soul Bloods have is very substantial. Beyond that, Nakai has a couple of interesting little tricks up his sleeve. One of those tricks is that he will actually gain vision and eventually be able to summon an army near Gor-Rok. And you can reliably, for the most part, get Confederation with Gor-Rok. You won't get Lord Kroq for that, because Gor-Rok under AI control doesn't start with Lord Kroq. But all of the territory that Gor-Rok has will be transferred to your vassal. And Gor-Rok will become a Horde army. Actually, all of your armies are Horde armies. That might seem like a downside, and there are certainly downsides to it, because those Horde armies do gain certain benefits, but they can't recruit units themselves. It's only through Nakai's army that you can recruit stuff. That does mean that if you ever really lose his army and your other Horde armies, you have no fallback plan. On the flip side, you get a huge number of benefits. You get increased hero capacity by +1 through a building right here. That is a pretty big advantage, and you can recruit all of the units of the Lizardmen. You are going to have some issues with, Dread Saurians and all that kind of stuff, kind of. But at the same time, the real benefits that Nakai does have in his campaign is with heroes, as well as various other units and faction effects. So, your faction effects really come from the temples of the old ones. When you take a territory, you can either raise it or dedicate it to a particular god of the Lizardmen. And these will unlock, as you dedicate more and more stuff, these will unlock certain benefits. There's passive benefits, things like missile resistance, melee defense, protection of Quetzal, unlocked for all armies, pretty useful right there. Ward save, so he does actually have the best Saurus from a combat perspective in the game, from that point of view. But very importantly, you can also unlock blessed units, and this will give you a bit of spawning sequence. It is a bit unfortunate because you just can't mass blessed units with this. You could before, but realistically, you do get a huge number of heroes, because what this does is it unlocks hero recruitment faction-wide, and it permanently increases your hero capacity for heroes as well. That means you don't have an army, you have Nakai and his group of dudes in his campaign, all the heroes that he can gain. And you're also increasing the hero recruit rank as well, so max rank heroes in a campaign, anyone? Yeah, that is ridiculously strong. Then you get things like campaign movement range, post-battle loot in this campaign, various combat benefits for certain units, all that good stuff. Or horde growth, income from vassals, 50%, skink priests, etc. So the benefits that you have here are significant. And then you have Nakai's unique research tree. That research tree gives you more and more horde growth, tribute from vassals, various other benefits. Primarily, it's going to increase tribute from vassals. which used to be a problem when the game launched, when Immortal Empires launched, because there was a cap on how much you would get tribute from vassals, but you can get a huge amount of it. Right here, going up to 50%. It's a very substantial income benefit. I'm not sure if it stacks or not. I think it used to, not entirely certain right now. But then you get other benefits as well, things like a lot of campaign movement range and all that. Essentially, Nakai might have a slow campaign start, but the sheer amount of heroes that he can have in his campaign. He does have limited armies, and those are capped. But suffice to say, you can get more heroes than most other factions combined. And actually, most other races combined, when you consider just the sheer ridiculousness of it. You have things to immune to chaos, corruption, and caste waste attrition. You get very geomantic nexus, hurt building construction costs. Heroes will be wounded instead of killed. Replenishing campaign movement range. Global recruitment duration -2. So, think of that. Those extra horde armies can recruit units globally faster, normally. Because they can get some buildings, and you can reduce that further. There's certainly some issues, certain things that need to be improved over here, as I see it, like, Dread Saurians and all that. But overall, one can't argue that the benefits that Kai has aren't very, very substantial. I personally dislike the slow start to a campaign, because that's when a campaign is most relevant. But undeniably so, Nakai has a fairly safe and powerful campaign to deal with. At least safe for now. We'll see once Tides of Torment comes out. I just wish that he had the more interesting starting position. I understand why they put them in a corner, because this used to be the corner of the map until they expanded it to the south in the Cafe and Hinterlands, because they thought that the vassal system didn't work. It didn't work in Warhammer 2, so it's like, okay, throw them in a corner, maybe that will work. But then CA vastly improved the vassal system in Warhammer 3 compared to 2, so you could have thrown him in a much more interesting situation. I think this campaign might work far better if you actually use the mod to teleport him. Like, it's as simple as getting a console command mod and using a teleporter command. Sure, you have your victory conditions that require you to deal with certain factions right here, but that's not too big of a deal. Honestly, I would prefer if he actually started in the middle of the cafe, and that would make things more interesting. But that's my perspective. A huge amount of power. It does work in terms of campaign dynamics. You might not just be able to spam blessed units, but Liam from Creative Assembly said that they don't want blessed units to just replace your regular units. Fair enough. They don't want players to just spam blessed units. They're there to complement. But then you have a mechanic that allows you to spam heroes, so maybe some tweaking is in order on that. Creative Assembly, just a thought. By the way, Nakai is strong, and he used to be miserable. He's no longer miserable. Finally, at number 1, we have Oxyotl. If there is a downside in Oxyotl's campaign, is the limitation on heroes, but in terms of units, Oxyotl can be quite ridiculous. He's been a bit nerfed with the Lizardmen rework. He used to be able to get a huge amount of blessed units, actually far more so than even Nakai, because of the various objectives that he does have in the vision of the old ones. So there's certainly some rebalancing in order, and hopefully Creative Assembly will improve on that. But here's the thing about Oxyotl. The reason Oxyotl's campaign is so awesome is because of how it plays. It's not really the power that you have in battle, though you certainly have pretty solid armies, and armies based on skirmisher units that are not so great in auto-resolve. That's a downside, but you can still make regular Saurus armies if you want that. But still, it is a really powerful army that you can win battles doing minimal to no casualties, and you get extra benefits for those kings. But really, it's not about the combat situation. It's not about Oxyotl's combat benefits that are really what make it work. Sure, skink oracles in old provinces, useful, campaign move range, ammunition, all that kind of stuff, right? Pretty good stuff. But what sets Oxyotl apart, what makes this campaign so incredibly powerful, are two things. One, the sanctums, which you can set up anywhere you want as long as you have vision in a province, or not even vision in a province. If you just know the province is there, you can get some useful benefits over here through the sanctums. But the bigger one is you can set up a capstone of Topic. You can only get one, but it allows you every turn to teleport to it. You can also teleport to your provincial capital. So inherently, through the capstone and your capital, you can zip around the map. That is in itself a very significant power level that you have in a campaign, and also makes the campaign far more dynamic. This is the only Lizardmen campaign where you do not have to touch the jungle whatsoever, and that alone makes it the best Lizardmen campaign, because seriously, screw the jungle in that respect. Like, it really sucks. I feel Oxyotl should have stock stands, but make no mistake, this little bastard is capable of, like, let me just say it like this. He starts a war with a Bloodthirster and he rips it to shreds. This is a guy who was stuck in the Realms of Chaos for thousands of years and survived and killed a lot of demons. Sure, you can't kill them permanently in the war, but all the same. There is a huge level of power. But then you have these visions of the old ones. These objectives, they give you money. They give you benefits. Sure, there's downsides if you don't do them in a campaign. Absolutely. But they unlock blessed units. You might struggle with, blessed spawning sequence, sure, from that perspective. But you get a lot of blessed units. But more importantly, from my view, beyond the money, the sanctum gems, you can play a campaign as Oxyotl so many different ways, because one of your early missions might take you all over the world. So if you want to play a campaign in the Northern Castres, you can. If you want to play one in Agrond or the Empire or the Darklands, you can. You just gotta wait for a mission to spawn there. And you can take territory. You show up there, you have immunity to diplomatic trespassing for Oxyotl himself, at least. So you have a huge amount of diplomatic capability. You have every climate in the game available to you. You don't care about that. You can set up shop wherever you want and beat the crap out of everyone. And that is awesome in a campaign. It's one of the most dynamic and interesting campaigns in the game. It used to be the best campaign that CA had in Immortal Empires for a very, very long time. And then we got things like Thrones of Decay, Malachi, Arbol, etc. But still one of the better campaigns, just certainly in terms of the uniqueness of the campaign mechanics, it is by far one of the best. It's just the problem that the Lizardmen race have always dragged down Oxyotl in his campaign. He does go a long way towards solving economic issues and all that, but he still has issues with hero capacity, slower construction, etc. Though that has been improved with the Lizardmen rework. Can be a bit dull in certain ways, absolutely, but you do have a good sense of a dynamic campaign. If there is a campaign for the Lizardmen I'd recommend as a starting point, it would probably be this. Or Kroq-Gar. Maybe, if you just want something more generic. But this one is a lot more fun, from my view. Cosine signing out. Stay tuned for more.